there's a sincerity in how bad of a person Richard Pryor is.
Uh-huh.
There's no, yeah, it's not a ploy to move up. June is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. And
Oof.
I, I stand up for men. Someone has to. I'm here for that. And I see you didn't text me, hey, how is your mental health doing, AP? Even though I did text a happy Pride to you, but it's okay.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
okay.
You know, those things definitely have equal amount of importance.
I would say so. It's June. What else is happening in June?
Absolutely nothing.
And the mental health awareness that needs to happen here is gonna be on the shoulders of what should have happened years ago. Because today we're gonna talk about a man
Okay.
and a man's mental health.
Finally, men get the spotlight.
And I am gonna make you aware of it.
Oh, I can't wait.
So buckle in, buckaroo. We are gonna talk about Richard Pryor.
It's about to get freaky deaky.
What you know about Richard Pryor?
So Richard Pryor is one of those comedians who I've seen people talk about online for years, and I've probably seen like a few clips here or there, but this was like the first time I'd actually watched like an entire special. And he's like known as like one of the most influential stand-up comics, like one of the people who people really look up to, and especially like his humor around like race, I think is like what a lot of people point to as like, in the 70s, like when he was doing that, it felt radical.
Yeah, and you love racial humor.
I maybe I'm skipping ahead, but I do like it when one of my very first thoughts when watching this is like, wow, I really love him making fun of white people. Us white people really gobble this shit up.
You're so woke. Look, I will refrain from speaking about that. So, not my business, I'm not part of the clan.
Yeah, you're just part of the men's rights health group. We're both canceling each other in this episode.
So, Richard Pryor is a very influential comedian. He is known throughout the United States and around the world. He was contemporaries with some other great men. Maybe somebody should have checked up on. Bill Cosby being one of them. But they should have checked up on what crimes he was doing.
Yeah, there you go.
So, Richard Pryor was born in December 1st, 1940. Pretty simple time to be born into. He was born in Peoria, Illinois.
Damn, me too.
Nice.
Yeah, didn't live there long, but I'm glad that Richard and I have something in common besides being comedians.
Your observations about the black community.
Damn it. I was gonna say, besides us both, both appearing on stage, and us both being queer, which I know is a spoiler, but gotta say it now.
So he was born into this little city in the heart of Illinois. This city is known for a couple of different things. One of them being the headquarters for Caterpillar, which is on the BDS. So, just so we know.
Yeah.
Haven't forgotten about that. I'll tell you that. It's also known for another thing, racism.
Ooh.
There is some history there about racism and how bad it is there, much like in many other places in rural Illinois. One of them being this high school was going by an offensive Chinese, let's just say, influenced name. And they didn't change that name, which I won't repeat here because it is just a slur. And it was only changed in the 2000s. It very recently changed from that. So Peoria's a real fun place. A lot of good stuff happening there.
Yeah. I definitely have a lot of friends who went to school in Peoria, but like my only real like emotional attachment to Peoria is that sometimes like when we drive past, my mom's like, "That's the hospital you were born at." So a little bit sad to hear that it's had a lot of racism, but that puts it in common with a lot of other American towns. So not really surprising.
Yeah, there's a lot of history there. And part of that history was a little old whorehouse, a brothel that Richard Pryor was born into. He lived in this brothel ran by his grandmother, who he called Mama. And it was kind of enforced, but also it was also a little bit of a hangout for Richard's father, who went by Buck. And Richard's mother also like hung around there and might have worked there too. But she kind of packed up her stuff and left to go to Springfield, Illinois. And that's something that's going to come up a lot in Richard's life. People that he really cares about, especially women, come in and leave, and he's part of the reason why. He's also broken up about it. He's also goes about treating his situation the worst way possible. And more importantly, there was almost no one trying to help him. There's just all of these different very explicit things happening around him. And part of that was this story that he told in his memoir that on how he lost his virginity. And this just shows the level of like abuse that was happening. He was under 16. He was a minor. And he was kind of lured into the house of this woman that was that hosted herself and her pimp, but they were both they were like romantically coupled. And Richard was abused by this woman, and then as he was cleaning himself up in the bathroom, the pimp walked in, started yelling for him to get out of the bathroom, to get his ass out of the bathroom. And Richard was very scared. He did not want to go out. And then when he walked out, he saw them both sitting on the couch, smiling at him.
Weird.
Yeah. In this moment that caused him great influx, it was for a joke, almost.
Mm-hmm.
It's so fucked.
Yeah.
And there's more stories like that.
His childhood just seems so hard, and you can definitely see. I mean, part of me is glad that he was able to turn all that trauma into something that could fuel him creatively, but also I'm like, I wish he just hadn't had to experience all that.
Yeah, same. I also wish that. And he just kind of landed at this small theater ran by a woman named Juliet Whitaker. He spent 2 years in the military. He went back to Peoria, and that's when he started his comedy career.
Wow. Back to Peoria.
Yeah.
Back to where it all started.
He started playing piano at this local bar that he got into the door through his dad. Buck knew the owner, and Richard said, "Hey, I know how to play the piano, and I can sing." And on the first night, he played the 3 chords he knew, and he just kind of crooned a little bit on the piano. And at the end of the night, the owner of the bar said that that Richard's the most audacious man he's ever met. Like he just lied his way through it, but that charmed him enough to the owner that he just started getting regular gigs. Part of his like stand-up routine was, well, I shouldn't say stand-up. He learned that like humor was easier for him to produce than to sing and to play the piano. And so he would open up a newspaper and just kind of read out what's happening and kind of react to it and make funny voices and joking about what's happening. In other words, he invented the podcast.
And he also invented like what Jon Stewart did.
Yeah, exactly. And he met some black entertainers and artists that would travel around all the Midwest just working. This black belt of entertainment, he described it as. And eventually he did that for years. One day moving to New York and really hitting on trying to not just be a living comedian, but truly that was the start of him becoming a legend. And that is when that's when he met Bill Cosby.
Yeah, like that's when the real meeting of the minds happened.
Yeah, Bill Cosby's like the smoking man. He just appears. He just says some weird shit and then leaves. Bill Cosby was more famous, and Richard Pryor just took it. He did an imitation of Bill Cosby for years in the beginning, down to making voices, being a little goofy with it too. And he worked the circuit for 5 years, eventually landing in his biggest job, which was playing the Flamingo in Las Vegas, because he had a fan that referred him to it, and that was Bobby Darin.
Wouldn't it be great to like have a fan who liked you so much that they or she booked like some big place for you, and then you used that to jumpstart your career?
Yeah, if only.
Yeah.
If only somebody that was listening in.
Yeah, I'm sure we got like someone with all the connections listening to Dove Weather.
Richard Pryor was making $2,500 a week for 3 weeks. So $7,500 for that job. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't make $2,500 a week. And this was in the 60s. Like, he was making money.
Yeah.
And after that Bobby Darin actually threw a party for him in LA. And that is kind of where he started to hit it big. He started to hit it big, doing a whole bunch of different things. Just going around, making a name for himself, partying, being a coke fiend. He also had a drug problem. I mean, you see this in his stand-up.
Yeah.
And he just kind of works it. He makes famous friends. He travels. He gets it done. But in the 70s, that's when things really started popping off for him. He wrote 2 episodes for Sanford and Sons. If you ever seen that show.
That's like one of those shows that I've probably like caught bits of here and there, but never watched a full episode.
He also wrote for Lily Tomlin. She had a variety show back in 1973. he was a co-writer on Blazing Saddles
Okay.
in 1974. After that, he acted in Car Wash in 1976. Do any of these?
I mean, I've seen Blazing Saddles,
Okay.
but it was one of those movies where I didn't like it when I first saw it, but I was like a kid.
Yeah.
So I think if I rewatched it, I would like more. But I think part of it was like I was like, ugh, this scene of them all farting at the campfire, it's just juvenile.
I watched it as a kid, and I mean, I liked it because it was just a moving image. Like I didn't have any like concrete like critiques on it or
Yeah.
whatever. But I watched it once in college with a couple of friends, and we're about 5 minutes in, and the first 5 minutes of Blazing Saddles is the scene of like railway workers, black railway workers, like being overseen by some white guy on a horse, and it's a very, very, very racial scene. Let's just say that. And around that time, there were just these guys that I was watching it with. We're just like, let's just stop this. And then from that, he also did Silver Streak in '76. He had the Richard Pryor show in 1977, and there was this sketch. It was a variety show. There was this sketch of Richard Pryor just being a drunk, or as he likes to say, wino, at a bar with like 3 other drunks, and eventually like he just shambles his way into his home, and then bam, Maya Angelou falls into this big monologue about what it means to be in love with this character and what it means to see the pain that he carries and he suffocates with alcohol. And she does this all in a very sincere and powerful scene. And I watched it after I read it in his memoir, and I wild. So such a beautiful scene and such a raunchy ass premise.
Yeah, that definitely sounds really powerful, and I wonder how people reacted to it at the time.
I wish I could. I wish I knew. I don't have any. I wish I knew.
We're gonna do a Back to the Future, but just going back to watch that live.
Yeah, of course, the TV girly wants to go back to the past to watch TV.
Yeah.
Then, he did just a couple of things like, I don't know, The Wiz.
Ooh.
And also, that was on 78. And then he did The Muppet Movie in 1979.
Yeah, there's like a lot of celebrities who randomly appear in that.
Yeah, but like this is Richard Pryor. This ain't James Corden.
Well, definitely.
And we get to 1979.
Yeah.
Richard Pryor is 38, 39, and he releases what's considered one of his best, if not the best, stand-up special that he did. And it goes by 2 names, but we'll call it Richard Pryor Live in Concert.
Yeah, and that's what we watched for this podcast.
So tell me, up top, what you think?
I really enjoyed it, and I think what I enjoyed was having this like idea of him in my head and then seeing what he was really like.
What was the idea?
Just this idea of this comic that was so influential that like everyone looked up to him.
You think that was too much hype?
No, and I'll say up top that I took an edible before watching this, and I think it helped. I think it like there is a moment where I was able to just like really key in to like, damn, this is the guy, and he lives up to it. Like, you know, his physical comedy is like unmatched. I haven't really seen any other stand-up comics that do physical comedy the way that he does.
So I also took an edible
Uh-huh.
and watched it, and yeah, so sympathetic here.
Yeah, we both got freaky.
And so after seeing it, is the hype real or?
I think the hype's real. I mean, you know, there's obviously things that are not great about the special.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But I think that like at his best, like yeah, he deserves the accolades that he got.
Yeah. You know, this special starts this is clearly such a developing concept at the time. Because this starts and Richard Pryor just walks out, and he walks out into the house lights just being on, and people just meandering back from intermission, from the bathroom.
Yeah, and of course, like he calls them out for it, which he's just like, white people are just coming back from the bathroom, and and they even have to say at the beginning, like, oh, by the way, like there was a performance before this, but we didn't include it because we didn't have time.
Patti LaBelle.
Yeah. And I think it just sets it off like amazingly, where you get to like kind of get to know some of the people in the crowd at the beginning, because like
it's so casual.
Yeah, you see, the guy taking pictures of Richard and
for too long.
Yeah, and,
like he got told twice to go.
Yeah, and him like making fun of him, and the guy even went for a handshake after all that, and. Yeah, I mean, you can see that there's kind of like a mix of like white and black people in the audience, and it's always like fun to watch when the black people in the audience are just like laughing so hard, and the white people are just kind of looking awkwardly around them while Richard Pryor makes fun of white people. So,
did you do that while you were sitting on a couch?
See, well, I was like writing things down in my journal while I was watching, so that was the action I was taking.
You were like, I do not do that.
I'm not like at the point where I'll be journaling during. Well, okay, if I'm doing my own open mic, then yeah, I might be journaling during other people's stuff because I'm preparing for my thing.
Stealing jokes.
No, but like yeah, if I'm seeing like if I'm going to a stand up show, I won't be journaling in the audience. It's not like how when I went to Slow Mo. Do you know what Slow Mo is?
No.
It's basically just a bunch of lesbians dancing is the main part of it. But yeah, I was like, I love doing this thing where I go back and forth between dancing and then journaling, or I'll dance a few songs and then I'll like go to like where people are just hanging out, and then I'll sit down and just start journaling.
That is so sapphic of you.
Yeah.
When I go to dance parties, I usually leave my pen and paper home.
Yeah, that's true. AP on the dance floor.
That's my journaling.
Yeah, if AP isn't buying drinks, AP is probably just going to be on the dance floor.
Okay, and speaking of buying drinks, like Richard Pryor just like spends that time in the beginning with the house lights on, just roasting the people coming back from getting their drinks, and he immediately gets into things where I thought, okay, Marcy's probably not gonna like this.
You were wrong.
Because like he's immediately started talking about how men just grab their dicks, specifically black men, like grab their dicks as a show of confidence, I guess. That's technically what the subtext was.
Yeah. No, I didn't dislike that. I feel like oftentimes like when I'm watching like a live comedy show, there might be a part of my brain that's like doing some sort of calculation of like, wait a minute, what is this person saying? But oftentimes like when you're just surrounded by people and they're laughing and like you think it's funny. You're like, well, I'm not gonna like turn on something inside me to make myself get upset about this.
Okay. All right. I see. But also you can't laugh too hard because you're like, what if that person, what if that person thinks I'm laughing at the wrong part of this?
I don't really get that type of anxious during comedy shows unless I'm high. But that's why you take the edible when you're watching something at home. You don't take the edible when you're watching a comedy show live.
Yeah. You just get plastered on whiskey. I thought you were going to dislike that, frankly.
No. The only part that I disliked was like the anti-Chinese racism.
Which we will get to. All right. Which we'll get to.
Well, I will say like my like in the beginning of the show, the part I actually didn't like as much was the part about dogs, just because like it was hard to be as emotionally invested about Richard Pryor talking about dogs than like the stuff that felt like it actually had like an edge to. So yeah, I wrote it down in my journal like these jokes about dogs. I don't know.
I kind of liked the dog stuff because at that point, it really introduced kind of this through line of Richard Pryor just putting on different voices and voices for the dog, voices for the owner, voices like one of the jokes is this young black guy is running away from a cop and the cop unleashes a dog on him and he just makes this voice of like saying that seeing the young guy run away much faster than like the dog could keep up, and he just like does this like swing of the arm and this exhalation and be like, ugh, and he does this voice for the dog that just runs throughout the whole special, where it's like this dog is supposed to be this character, this voice that is like undercutting what's happening for the sake of its own sanity or his own sanity.
Yeah, I definitely liked that aspect of it. I feel like oftentimes there would be bits that Richard Pryor would be doing where the thing I was really keyed into was either what he was doing with his voice or what he was doing with his body.
Yeah, and part of that same bit, he makes this note where like, oh, he got real low, and he does get low. He like squats down. He gets, he leans forward as if he's running really fast, and he sells it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like he really commits to like everything he does, and sometimes you're like, how does he have all the energy to do that? But at the same time, like that's what people think when I do karaoke. So
You're just like him for real.
Karaoke is only like 5 minutes, and then like you're off the stage. So he's like doing it for over an hour.
He's very physical too, as you said. Like the squirrel monkey bit.
Yeah.
Like he just kind of fucks the air like 3 times while doing this high pitched squeaking.
Yeah, that was very funny to me. Yeah. I was like, okay, the dogs aren't working, but this monkey bit, perfect.
Yeah, animals are such a big part of this for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And one of them is a deer.
Yep.
And I think this deer bit that he did, I think it encapsulates everything that about the observational and the presentational style of Richard Pryor. He first introduces this idea of being in the woods is scary. And guess what? Yes, it is.
Truly.
And especially, I'm a city boy. You know this about me.
Yeah.
I need boba to be near me within a 10-minute walking distance.
Yeah, if you can't see a CTA stop, you're done.
He does this pantomime of a deer being really scared of everything that's happening, and it just like squanches on towards the water. He slowly just pantomimes the deer going closer to the water, but then getting scared and just looking up. And he sells it.
Yeah.
He sells it. It's so physically, it's theater. He's just doing theater.
Yeah, for me, this is about when the edible hit. And I think at this point, I was just imagining being in the audience and like watching him do this bit. And that's the thing is like you can be keyed into so many different aspects of what he's doing. And you can see how when Comedy Central would like do advertisements for a show, they would always just like take all the like the silly sounds that people make and put those all together. And you could definitely do that with like even this special. But there's also so much else going on in it.
So much. And we talked about the voices, just being able to inhabit different characters instantly. And the audience just goes with it. Also the physicality that he shows. Not just being very physical, running up and down the stage, but also being able to mime out a scene and you understanding it fully.
Yeah. He's able to like the thing about it is that there are some times where he like is spending one time like a long time on one topic, and then sometimes he's like going quick fire on like boom and then transition to boom 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 boom, but like his physical performance holds it all together.
Mm-hmm. And he looks good doing it.
He does like while I watched this I was like I can see why he was a bit of a sex symbol.
Mm-hmm. Well, he was also just fucking a lot. Part of that, and he would always get into situations with that. He talks about it in the special, and one of them is this situation that happened with him and his wife, Deborah. Deborah was this actor that he met, married, stuck around with for 4 years. He married a lot of people. He technically had 7 marriages. That's just one of the things he did. Check on your blokes. Check on your guys. It's men's mental health awareness.
How many marriages have you had, AP?
I'm behind.
You're behind. Okay.
I'm behind. I don't even have my first divorce yet.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like, you could like the speed run. Like when you hit your 40s, you could just have like 6 different marriages.
Watch me.
Yeah, I will.
And before this special with Deborah, he was having a fallout in New Year's Eve. So, like he just celebrated his birthday and now he's having this big fight with his wife. And part of that is him, her wanting to leave and him not wanting her to leave. And this fight kind of leads to the wife and her friends going outside, and then Richard Pryor following them. He doesn't want them to leave. They're walking towards this Mercedes that is his in the driveway, and he, in his coked out, drunken rage, and womanizing rage also, he takes out a gun and he shoots the car.
Yeah, when he started talking about this, it was interesting because he started by saying, much as I done fucked up this year, and then the audience just started laughing. And I was like, okay, there's definitely some stuff that's happened in his personal life that I need to get some context for. And it's interesting because I feel like, we talk a lot about cancel culture for comedians these days, and like, oh, this comedian did this thing and then they were canceled and then they came back and then the audience gobbled them up. This obviously feels a little bit different, but it is interesting how Richard Pryor's outside life like intersects with his comedy and how the audience responds to it.
And I agree with you there. Like, this is real violence happening in his real life with real consequences. The charges were dropped, but the consequences are that Well, it's kind of known that he's fucked up. And that's why the audience laughs. They laugh with him or at him, I don't know. But they laugh. Maybe it's even uncomfortable. But that's where he uses all the bullshit that he both created and had done to him to make his art. And it works. Like when he made that joke about shooting a tire and then he like pantomimes it being hurt.
Yeah, he does the sounds for the tires and it's amazing.
And it works. And part of that also just hits on this use of voice. Because he gives these inanimate objects a voice. He personalizes everything. He personifies everything. Including the engine falling out and it having a sense of humor and being like, I'm done. This goes throughout the special. So I want to talk about 2 bits. The first one being this bit about boxers. One of them being the great Muhammad Ali, and the other one being Leon Spinks. And the way that Richard Pryor like interweaves this story, I think shows how he sees power and respect, and how he wants to both make jokes at the expense of others, but also recognize their skills and their abilities. Leon Spinks, I think, might be the boxer that most people in 2024 don't know. And all you need to know is that he's a heavyweight fighter and he's got some busted up teeth. And that's where the jokes begin. But he's also considered a little dumb. And and that's where this wordplay comes in that I really like. And it all revolves around the words freaky deaky.
Freaky deaky.
He says it 3 times.
He does. And you know, when he did this, part of me thought that like, oh, is this his catchphrase? He's saying it that often. And then I Googled it, and then like I got like a Tyga song or something, and I was like, okay, well, obviously this phrase has been used a lot.
Yeah, it's just a phrase that I've known pretty much my whole life.
There's like a freaky deaky like music festival even.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's called our live episodes. And he says it 3 times. The first one being this guy interrupts Leon, and he just turns around and puts on this suave, smart, cooler than you could ever be voice, and he says, freaky deaky. As a way of saying, you don't fuck with Leon. So in other words, he gives respect to Leon. He says, this is a heavyweight champion, twice over by this time. You need to respect this man. He's got this confidence. Then on the second time, he's talking about fighting Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali being one of the best to ever do it. Look him up if you don't know him. But he is known for a couple of things. Being very fast, being very witty, and being just an incredible athlete. And also being very political too. And Richard just jokes about him being in the boxing ring, Leon fighting Muhammad Ali. And he says that Leon has nothing to lose. He's got no money. He's got no teeth. He says teethers. And he says he's got no driver's license. This is all in a goofy voice. He says freaky deaky at that point. Give me, you want
freaky deaky.
He says it in the voice that it's the same goofy voice that the dogs were given. Mm-hmm. So but it's, in other words, it's kind of friendly.
Yeah.
It's kind of silly, but it's kind of friendly, like a way you would expect a dog to speak, with no malice, maybe even being endearing. But on the third time, this is when I'm just like, this man's incredible. On the third time, he's talking about what else? Parental violence. He brings up parental violence there. He talks about him being hit by his dad, and how a hard buck hit him in his chest, that it kind of concaved around him, and how he was living with that thought in his mind when he was at a charity event with Muhammad Ali to kind of like have a show match. And he says at that point, what if he has a flashback and he thinks he's actually fighting, and he hits me so hard, and then he finally hits on the third freaky deaky. And this is definitely a mocking voice. The type of voice where you would put on in a playground to kind of make fun of someone. And it's wild. He hit it 3 times.
I mean, it's the classic comedy rule 3.
He hit it 3 times in 3 different ways with 3 different intonations, providing this like interweaving of like love, respect, and clowning. And it all felt natural.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think you can definitely watch comedy specials and you see someone like trying to force a catchphrase, and you're like, do I really need this? You know, like, hopefully you're not watching Carlos Mencia.
Yeah, I mean, he was famous for putting on a voice of someone with disabilities and just making that the punchline.
Yeah. Hot take. Richard Pryor, more talented than Carlos Mencia.
Ooh, man. Yeah, you got to put on gloves before touching that one. The final bit is this bit about having sex with a woman. He says up top that all men are afraid when having sex. And this is what I mean. He comes in low. Then he says, it becomes about ego when a woman says, hey, I've never had an orgasm. And then he pantomimes opening up a briefcase and taking out a vibrator.
Yeah, I this whole section was really interesting because, first of all, he's basically saying like he can't last for longer than 3 minutes most of the time, and that like a lot of times, you know, it's like he like pantomimes like having sex like very vigorously, and then he like he puts on like a woman voice and it's like, oh, I didn't come, and then basically talks about macho man and about how essentially his masculinity makes it so that he can't focus on making a woman come. And yeah, there's like so much going on in it. And there's like parts of it where I'm like, this is a very man in 70s like situation, but also the fact that he's actually contending with the masculinity is really interesting. And then that part that you mentioned, like, because we've seen him do so many voices, it's like, of course he's going to like do different like sound effects for different vibrators.
Well, it was only one vibrator. He plugs it in, takes it out, and then he does the different sounds for how it's being used and whether or not it's inside somebody or not.
Yeah.
And he does it all without pre-emphasis. He doesn't say, I'm taking out a vibrator, blah, blah, blah. This bit can be seen in 2024.
Yeah. Like the fact that he's able to I feel like he could like make any sound in the world. And it's like, damn, I know exactly what he's doing. And it's funny at the same time. So yeah, like, you know, he's committing to every bit. not just with his body, but also his face. Like I think like when you open Netflix, I mean, of course, Netflix likes to put different images for each person, but the one they gave for me was like Richard Pryor with his mouth open wide and his tongue stuck out, like making a funny face. He was probably just like doing that while he was like making a noise. Like he wasn't trying to be like, you know, extremely goofy. He was just trying to like, you know, put the energy that's inside his body into making that noise and making people laugh.
It's like it's not an imitation of an imitation. He is. This might be the source. This might be the origination of it. And especially knowing that how influential he is, it probably is. I want to bring in a couple of comedians. Let me start with Matt Rife.
Okay.
You know this man?
Not really. Like I've heard his name, but I haven't like seen any of his comedy.
Look, same. That is the exact same relationship I had with the name Matt Rife. He just appeared one day last year, and then I was just like, no. I watched this Netflix comedy special.
God bless you.
Natural Selection. And in it, he is known for one thing. The beginning of it, he kind of makes it clear that he is looking to have a more predominantly male audience than his at the time, more female audience. And he makes that declaration by making a domestic violence joke, which is, I'm not even gonna like tell the background of it because it doesn't matter. Like at the end of the day, it's just hey, domestic violence.
So when this is happening, is there like sounds from part of his audience that like of like, I don't like this and I'm gonna leave, or is it just like everyone's eating it up?
There's groans, but frankly, groans these days just kind of mean I'm reacting to something.
Yeah.
So I'm not entirely sure, but it's so hacky. It sucks. It's so bad. He hits on every cliche. That women are crazy, that gum doesn't last, on astrology, old people, people with mental disabilities, they have big dicks. He talks about religious women. He talks about black people being afraid of the KKK, ghosts. He talks about fucking ghosts. And finding porn, doing shit. And he eventually just gets to airplanes. He has 10 minutes on airplanes.
Does he talk about airplane food?
I can't tell you. I have forgotten most of it.
Uh-huh.
And he also talks about cancel culture.
Uh-huh.
Which, guess what? And I say this not as I say this purely to contrast. This guy, Matt Rife, is all about, I am being canceled. People hate me. I am controversial. I say things people don't want to hear. And then you have Richard Pryor in the 70s, literally abusing women and making jokes of it. Uh-huh. And this is so clear to me. In the whole seeing Matt Rife and seeing Richard Pryor. Matt Rife is complaining about people chirping online when the things he's saying he's controversial for can be seen in many playgrounds, in many Twitter threads, online all the time. In other words, he's a pussy.
Happy Men's Health Month, everyone.
It's just fuck. If you're going to complain about being canceled, at least do something that isn't just flapping your lips.
I don't know if I can quite join you on this limb, because it almost sounds like you're saying Matt Rife should do domestic violence if he really wants to get canceled or something.
I'm saying Matt Rife really is what he's doing is saying, I am a bad person. Cancel me. When what he is doing is perfectly acceptable within the realms of liberal conversations.
Right. I think, most most visibly with Louis C.K., who got canceled online and then made that part of his bit when he came back and is selling out shows now, where this idea of cancel culture has essentially just become like a cultural signifier that has nothing to do with its initial meaning and
Absolutely
has
not.
like no real value. Yeah.
But it's also just bait. Like Matt Rife just is using this idea of saying being edgy or controversial as a marketing tactic. And that's what it is.
Yeah.
Like Richard Pryor did a lot of fucked up shit. Things that no one should do. And he also lived through things that no one should be living through.
Yeah, it does make me wonder, because we haven't gotten to the most problematic bits of Richard Pryor's special yet. If Richard Pryor was a comedian now, would he fall into some of the same cancel culture holes that some comedians are now? Because I think that people would try to cancel Richard Pryor. That would happen, and he would have to respond to it. This is kind of like a weird hypothetical because like Richard Pryor influenced people who are performing today, so you can't really just like take him out of time and put him into now. But it does make me think.
No, absolutely. There are many things that you would want to say to Richard Pryor. There are many things I would want to say to Richard Pryor if he did something bad, racist, or womanizing in front of me. Same thing with Matt Rife. Except I know Matt Rife is it's almost I know it's a little fucked up, but Matt Rife is trying to take the credentials of like a bad person, like someone that is capital B bad, someone who's done reprehensible things, and he's trying to use that as the basis of his comedy. Yeah. Unlike Richard Pryor, who is just a bad person and is talking about the bad shit he's done.
Although I wouldn't be surprised, maybe not Matt Rife, but some other people of his ilk. Some of them probably have done a lot of shitty things and we just don't know about them. And they're kind of using the whole cancel culture thing as a way to like feel like they're talking about like who they are as a person without having to reveal the things that they've actually done that like would get them like fucking destroyed.
Yeah. And if it turns out that Matt Rife did some fucked up shit, you know what? I wouldn't be surprised. Mm-hmm. But I do know it's I know my critique is so fucked up that it's like you're padding your bad person resume. That's technically what I'm saying here. Mm-hmm. But it just shows how it doesn't live up to what he wants, which is to be considered a pariah.
Yeah. I mean, I think like the fact that like a rightward shift is something that so many comedians and content creators have seen as something that is going to make them more popular is a sign of the times, and also just like kind of depressing. Like, Richard Pryor, he's just talking about the shit in his life.
Yeah.
Like, he's not like making the decision like, oh, if I talk about this, it's gonna get me, this right-wing base that's gonna carry me all the way.
Mm-hmm. There's a sincerity in how bad of a person Richard Pryor is. There's no, it's not a ploy to move up.
Yeah, although I will say that when he's talking about like the violence that he experienced with his family, it does seem like he has like learned a little bit when he's like, yeah, but I don't hit my kids. I just yell at them and then they lie to me.
That is the thing. is that yeah, he has like maybe I should mention this. Like, I believe you should see a person, especially someone who has passed. Richard Pryor died in 2005. You should see them in their entirety, the good and the bad, the pretty and the ugly. Like, so to me, in one breath, I will gladly say something he did was very talentful, and something that he did was just kind of a piece of shit move. So, if just so you know, but I want to talk about another comedian, Ricky Gervais.
Boo!
I watched his latest special called Armageddon, and in it, his whole thing is I am being canceled. I am not woke enough. He has taken a rightward shift for seemingly no other reason than people retweet him and shit on him. Like there was no, I couldn't find anything that's like, that his show was canceled or some other like institution brought down some hammer because he was being an asshole.
Yeah, and I know that both of us have a history with Ricky Gervais where both of us used to like him to some degree. And I think with me, I enjoyed some of his early Golden Globes hosting stints where he would like make fun of celebrities kind of to their faces, because I thought like, oh, he's speaking truth to power. But looking back on some of that, a lot of his jokes like weren't actually speaking truth to power. And I think probably some of the responses that he received to stuff like that probably did cause somewhat of a rightward shift where he's like, oh, why are people like tweeting that I'm shitty after I make fun of celebrities? Isn't that what you want from me? Okay, the only way I know now is to just say the worst shit ever. I don't know. Who knows?
I will not get into my history with him, other than I've seen a couple of his movies and specials, and now I'm deeply embarrassed that I have.
Yeah.
I want to talk about one bit with Ricky Gervais. He does this bit that goes along the lines of saying like, infant mortality rate is very low in England and also in Africa. And then he goes on to be racist by saying that you could be born in a mud hut and a lion could want to eat you and you're already in a bad situation. And the punchline, or one of the punchlines he hits on, is saying, oh, and you're a baby with AIDS. As in, oh, you're in Africa, therefore you have AIDS now. And it's as funny as you think it would be.
Not at all.
And he just goes on to make some more jokes about other people's races. One of them being the other staple of British comedy, pedophilia. He talks about how there's 10 million pedophiles in China. And he goes on to make this joke about how a pedophile might want to groom a child with a puppy, and then he goes on to make the most common racist joke ever, that Asian people eat dogs. So he is at the top of his game here.
Yeah, I mean, Richard Pryor like does some pretty bad anti-Chinese racism in his special, but this sounds maybe even worse.
The thing is, like, Richard Pryor actually was racist. He actually just put on a racist accent. He did it twice, and about a person with a disability. Like Ricky Gervais is trying to once again pad out his like racist CV by making these edgy ass jokes, including the AIDS one, the baby AIDS one, where he says, "Oh, and I didn't do the accent because my wife said not to," and Richard Pryor just did the accent. And once again, all I could think about is how pathetic it is to try to pad out your CV of being an asshole and just not going the extra mile.
I will say it does suck that like it seems like the Ricky Gervais of real life is a worse version of Ricky Gervais on The Office UK, David Brent. But at least on The Office, like you had everyone, all the other characters, like looking askance at Ricky Gervais's character, and it was clear that the show looked down on him. But like when you get Ricky Gervais in real life, there's no scaffolding. You're just getting his bullshit.
Richard Pryor just did something incredibly racist on stage, and people were laughing. And I don't want to like sound like I am saying like, oh, what happened to the good old days of just people being assholes? Why can't they just be assholes now? I mean to say that something has happened in liberalism that has squished down so many things that even the people that are quote unquote controversial or edgy or pushing the envelope or on the fringes or whatnot, liberalism has infiltrated the use of anti-racist words, phrases, and concepts to help evolve and continue and perpetuate the use of these words. And they have become not defanged, but they have become a synthetic tooth used, visible. You could see the visible lineage of what was the trash that came before it. But now it's just placed in such a way that you can see it for what it is. It's danger, but it is wholly manufactured for something else.
So it sounds like a lot of comedians nowadays are trying to seem conservative enough that they win right-wing people over, but in a way where they couch it in liberalism in order to not scare away like the rest of their potential mainstream audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It really is just these comedians know the space of what they can and can't say and how they can and can't say it. And they all willingly live within this space because it provides a very lucrative path, and it also provides a very useful path to just getting to the next stage of going higher and higher up.
What's the name of that guy who got fired from SNL and then came back?
Shane Gillis?
Yeah. It feels very much like him, where, you know, he went too far to the right, and now years later he's able to come back and he's kind of finessed the boundaries of his comedy so that he's acceptable on Saturday Night Live.
Mm-hmm. I don't know anything about Shane Gillis. He's also just a name that appeared one day to me.
Yeah.
And I don't really want to know.
I mean, I'm not sure if there's really that much of a difference between him and Matt Rife. They're kind of part of the same epidemic.
And funny enough, Shane Gillis, the reason why he was kicked off of SNL,
Anti-Asian racism.
Anti-Asian racism. So fucked up. I want to just end this conversation about comedians with one thing. I watched the John Mulaney special.
Mm-hmm.
And at a certain point, he makes this little song and dance about what happened to him being in the pandemic, having a drug addiction, and getting a divorce after cheating. and going to rehab, he does this little song, and then he hits on the idea that Bo Burnham is like more popular than him, and he ends it with the line, "Likability is a jail," as if everything that he said or he's done in the last couple of years is so bad that he should not, that he is losing opportunities or avenues to be an even more rich, more influential, and more connected comedian. And he's not.
So I think John Mulaney is maybe the one comic that we're talking about today that we differ on, because I think I definitely like this special more than you did. And I think that part of it is that I'm not like the biggest John Mulaney fan in the world. I had only seen one of his specials before this, and it was with a group of friends, like on a trip to Austin, and like some of them liked John Mulaney more than me, and I was like, I enjoyed that first special, but like I didn't really understand like why he was blowing up the way he was, and then like all the drama happened, and I like mostly saw it from afar, where people were kind of being like, oh, I can't believe John Mulaney did this, and other people being like, why do you have this parasocial relationship with a celebrity? And then like I was like, okay, I guess John Mulaney, I guess he's just gone now. But then the special came out, and then critics were talking about how much they liked it. And I was like, okay, I should check it out. And I did. And I was like, okay, you know what? I do enjoy this. I do kind of enjoy him contending with everything that's happened and not running away from it, but kind of like really, making it funny, but still treating it seriously. Mm-hmm. The likability is a prison. I think it's like I didn't take that whole song too seriously, so I didn't really like think like, oh, is it a little bit hypocritical for him to be making this song? But yeah, John Mulaney's not someone who I'm gonna like go to the bat for like during the revolution or whatever, but like I think he's funny sometimes. Like I think I'm glad that he's making comedy.
Yeah. And I mean, go ahead. Like I don't have anything against John Mulaney. Like he's this milquetoast like comedian that makes jokes about, I don't even know what he makes jokes about. Cocaine sometimes? But like that's the new him, from what I understand. I will say though that these three comedians, they all live well within that range of what is acceptably edgy and negative. Some more at the fringes, some closer to the center. But they all use this idea that they are being ostracized for what they are saying, and saying that their actions have these outsized consequences because the quote-unquote truth that they're dropping. Once again, at different scales, at different shades. But they're all well within that rung, those rungs of, I can say this because it's going to make me money at the end of the day. And it also going to reinforce all the bullshit that I'm part of. The patriarchy, capitalism, so on and so on.
Yeah, internally, I definitely don't put John Mulaney in the same category as the other two. But at the same time, I see kind of where you're going, where none of these comedians are really breaking the mold of what comedy is now. I do think that there are people now who are doing something a little bit more avant-garde. Julio Torres, shout out to him.
My boy.
And so many other people. I mean, we haven't even talked about women in comedy.
Oh, so absolutely. Women in comedy is important. They provide, I think, a clearer sense of what is political these days. And one of them that comes to mind is Natalie Palmeides, who had this one-man show called Nate, a one-man show. It's on Netflix too, and it hits on a very specific themes and topics that are that the greater conversation is struggling with right now.
Yeah, and we can even look beyond the gender binary. Mae Martin, of course, a double triple icon for their comedy and also for dating Parvati from Survivor. And yeah, there's a great queer comedy scene in Chicago that I hope to get more into. And we're just scratching the surface of comedy. But you know what? I think there's more. There's more to why we're talking about Richard Pryor, isn't there? There's more going on here.
That's right. There's just a little bit more. There's a reason why I want to talk about Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor has done a lot of things. But as I was looking back both at my history and my memories of him, and then going to look for information on that, I can't help but see the theme of queerness a lot in his life. And I just want to run through a couple of things. The kind of black belt entertainer group that he was part of for a little bit in his early career, like he talked about he talked about meeting women who are trans. He uses a very different T word to describe them, and he talks about being scared to see them. And it makes sense because he just used women his whole life, and that was his main source of relief sometimes. Including this one Latina lover that he had, that ended up that he was just kind of like fucking in New York for a bit and doing cocaine with, and her name's Tia. And she just, one day, after a real fight that they had, Richard Pryor learns that she's bisexual. She's got an actual girlfriend at the same time that she's seeing Richard. And he also talks about this great adoration he had for Miles Davis, to the point that you could almost see a tinge of that kind of lover's admiration. And he reminisces in his biography one day walking into Miles' room and seeing him kissing Dizzy Gillespie, just kissing another man. Except Richard Pryor has this difficult relationship with seeing men interact with each other sexually or romantically. But he plays with it too. He has this bit in another special where he talks about sucking dick and how you have to be careful with sucking dick because you could just get addicted.
Damn, I wish that was in this special.
So, in another book that I read about him, called Becoming Richard Pryor, it goes into a little bit of the history that Richard had with this gentleman called Wilbur Harp. And he talked about how he might have dated him a little bit. He liked his booty. He said he had a great asshole. Richard also said how nobody would admit that they were spending time with Wilbur. But at nighttime, he would see people just mosey on into his place. And who knows what else. In this book, he also talks about how Wilbur and Richard Pryor spent some time in Chicago living together for a couple of weeks. And nobody knows what happened. Only Richard and Wilbur know. And they're both dead. And one final thing here is that kind of like fling, that kind of like excitement, that kind of like maybe a little more queer relationship, it didn't just happen once. It might have happened multiple times. And I bring all of this up and I bring all of this evidence up to say one thing. I don't want to be like Richard Pryor. Like, I like Richard Pryor for many reasons. I relate a lot to his experience and his way of thinking and his vulgarity. I'm more vulgar off mic, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And reading these and watching these specials and doing all this research, I understood one thing within me. Said, I don't want to be like Richard Pryor. Even though I have this admiration for him, even though he's someone I've known literally my whole life, I don't want to be like Richard Pryor. In the sense that I don't want to act as if what is within me is something to put aside. So I do want to say here on this June that I'm not exactly straight.
Woo! There we go. There we go. Happy Pride, everyone.
Happy Pride.
Yay.
It's a long walk and to get here. And all I want to say is that I'm not exactly straight, but I'm using the word pansexual to describe myself. And much like many things in my life, it's not just flowers that make me think. It's not just poems that make me think, but it's also the way other people have disastrously lived their life that make me think. And I want to make it clear that as of right now, I want everybody to know that this is a queer podcast.
That's right.
Bitches.
Yep, we got 2 queer podcasters over here. Plus Nomi. I mean, she's pretty
She's the
queer
gayest
herself.
one here.
Yeah, so 100% queer podcast. Yeah, how does it feel to come out on the podcast?
That's one of the things is that I don't know if I am coming out. I used to describe myself as pansexual at my freshman year of college. And I started to have that kind of mindset in high school. So it's not a question about coming out as much as I see what's happening all around the world. And I want to make it clear. I am with the queers because I am one. And I encourage everyone to live it up.
Yeah. So I know that like when AP and I first met, we went to parties and we got to know each other that way. And after we had spent some more time together, we started talking. Sometimes we would stay up late and talk about things. And sometimes I would ask him like, are you sure that you're a man? Like, are you sure you're not non-binary? I may not have said it so bluntly, but that was kind of like where I was getting at.
She hit me with the age-old, when did you know you were a man?
Yeah, so I think I didn't have my finger on quite what was going on, but there was a part of me that knew that AP wasn't, a 100% straight cishet man.
I mean, can I ask why did you think that?
I mean, I do think part of it was that you were hanging out with a lot of queer people. And, I myself, I am someone who was drawn to queer people before I figured out I was queer. It's podcast lore that I came out as trans at the beginning of 2021. And, the year before that, the uprising, a lot of the people who were organizing for Black Lives were queer people, and I was
Yeah.
organizing with them. And then it's like, as I spent more time with the queer community, I think it became easier for me to envision myself as queer, myself as trans. I think that, like, when I was younger, I didn't have that community, and I just saw the default as like straight and cis. But I think that's like one of the beautiful things about queer community is that, like, your conception of who you are changes as you exist within it.
Yeah. And I've been around queer people my whole life, I would say. Um, I've always lived in cities, so like it's always been that way, I think. Mm, And there's no timeline I could describe for you, and I I just know that it's good. You if you have not spent any time with a bunch of queer people, a bunch of gays, go try it. Go see what's up. Believe it or not, they're just people.
Yeah, I'm just imagining like the most macho, straight white guy like marching up to a party full of queer people and being like, I just listened to this podcast and they told me to hang out with queer people, so I'm gonna do that now.
Well, you know what? Yeah, actually, that would be beautiful. I'm not saying it's gonna be easy or perfect. And one of the things that I despise about this, like, framing of cancel culture, cancel culture, cancel culture, that if you say the wrong thing, you're gonna be canceled. I despise seeing that, hearing that. I despise it because at every turn in all the different communities I've been part of, and however plugged in I was, I know that I have been lackluster in my way of speech. But I also know that the people around me, as long as they're chill, they're gonna help you get plugged in, understand what is happening. So it would be beautiful if that hypothetical man did that.
I mean, even within this episode, like, we could self critique and say, we should say sex worker instead of prostitute.
Yeah.
I think part of the reason why you were saying those words is that those were the words that were used at the time.
Yep.
Those are the words in Richard Pryor's memoir. Um, but yeah, I just want to say I'm really happy that you decided to express this in the podcast, that you're sharing more about yourself. When we first started this podcast, I think we both knew that we wanted to share more of ourselves with the world, but it was kind of more hypothetical at first, of like, how do we go from just talking about pop culture and media and art to talking about ourselves and revealing parts of ourselves that we may not have revealed to people besides like small conversations. And here you are doing it, so congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it. And the reason why I love talking about art and media is because it is that exploration of the material and the self. Um, I, I mean, I don't know. Richard Pryor needed a lot of help, right? And I think there was a lot of people that didn't want to see him get help because he was making a lot of money for him. And I'm not in that situation. I I am in a situation though where people provide help in pieces and in whole. And with all of that, it's just it makes living a life closer to the true self easier. So yeah, that's maybe one of the major reasons why I wanted to do this podcast. Maybe that's also one of the major reasons why I wanted you to be part of this podcast, because you are someone who I see challenge themselves and dive deeper into that truer self.
Mm-hmm. And throughout this experience of making this podcast with you, you have challenged me a lot. Sometimes it annoys me, but sometimes I'm like, I really appreciate AP doing this, because like, if we don't challenge each other, then we could very easily just stay stuck where we are. And I'm someone who very much does not want to stay stuck where I am. Being trans, it's not just about changing my pronouns and starting HRT. It's kind of a lifelong thing. And it's not just about like preparing for this or that thing. It's making like these everyday changes and challenging myself and each other. So I'm glad that we can both be in that journey together.
Yeah, it's a good journey.
Yeah.
It's a good journey, and who knows what else we'll learn.
Yeah.
We already said last podcast episode that if we were gonna be appliances, if we were trans appliances, we already know that, and now the listeners know that. Who knows? Maybe someday I'll be on stage saying I've sucked a dick before.
Oh man, I would love to see that.
Or maybe I already have.
Ooh.
Who knows? You'll never know, listener.
Speaking of sucking dicks, you didn't even mention Marlon Brando in the hit list.
Right. That is the big one. Marlon Brando, one of the children of Richard Pryor, I think it was Rain Pryor, would speak about how Richard Pryor and Marlon Brando would get down.
Yeah, I think I saw that Richard Pryor, because basically it was Quincy Jones, right? Is that who it was?
Quincy Jones just started like blabbing about everything he saw like 8 years ago.
Yeah, and then like Richard Pryor's ex confirmed it, and then one of Richard Pryor's family members is like, "Oh, you're just doing this for attention. It's not true." But yeah, I think Richard Pryor himself said that he's bisexual. Like, this isn't really a secret.
Yeah.
Marlon Brando, yeah, he definitely fucked Richard Pryor. Like, there's nothing you can say that will make me not believe.
I thought you were gonna say he definitely fucked Richard Pryor like wild style, like sweat,
Freaky deaky style.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe I think what would solve all of this is if we had a time machine and then AP could go fuck Richard Pryor.
I don't know about that.
Hey, you said to lay out the freak, and I'm doing it, baby.
Our mustaches would tangle up.
Look, some people are into that.
I don't think a man in the 70s is washed well enough. Like, men in the 2020s aren't washed well.
Yeah, good luck finding a decade where they are.
True.
Yeah.
I don't have too much more to say than that. Folks, good folks out there listening, it's Pride, and you should take pride in who you are, and whether or not it's well within an acceptable range, which is where I would say I sit, in an acceptable range of the quote-unquote mainstream. Like, I don't think anybody's gonna like hate crime me because I am pansexual. But that's also not the point, because I want to make sure that we live in a world where no one is getting hate crime. Yeah. And this pride might not be about me. It might not be about you. But you know what it is about? Us.
Yeah. As Bernie Sanders said, not me, us. Bernie, the gays salute you, except for some of your politics around Palestine and police. But yeah, just dropping in some stuff to get the discourse going at the end of the podcast.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening, y'all. Always and forever, Viva Palestina.
And stay gay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.